How did the Haaland and the WWE campaigns measure up to your expectations?
We've never had someone external in the game before. Should we do it? Maybe people don't like WWE. And is this going to negatively affect their experience? In the earlier days of Clash, we put a lot of emphasis on really high quality animations. Where we want to go is building more of the content and lore, where our aim is that if we ask anyone in the world to think of a game, they think of Clash of Clans.
We've also seen the announcement of a Netflix show. Are you able to share information about that? Clash of Clans did merchandise in the past. Can we expect that to come back in the future, or? David, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Well, let's dive straight into this. Can you give us a brief explanation as to what the marketing team does for Clash of Clans?
Yeah, sure. So we're ultimately, as with every other team, trying to fulfill the Supercell mission of making games that as many people as possible play and are remembered forever. What does that mean in practice? We want to create things that our existing players will love, and this is of course working with people like yourself, creating fun animation content, having some content in the game input there, and we also see a huge part of our role is to bring people into the game. That can start with making people aware of Clash of Clans and ultimately trying to trigger them to come in. And there's of course a lot of different tools we use for this. Some of it's branding, some performance marketing, big partnerships, working with creators, a bit of everything. So we want to delight the people who are in the game and bring new ones in.
Awesome. Yeah, you mentioned partnerships there, and collaborations is something that we've seen develop over the last year or so of Clash of Clans. We've not really seen a lot of collaborations before that point. Obviously, we're going to discuss the Haaland and WWE collaborations a little bit more, but can you talk about how long it takes from concept of a partnership all the way until the players actually see it in the game?
Yeah, sure. So, of course, it depends case by case, but in these two real examples, it took a little over a year in both instances. This is because when we start, we're often moving very slowly. So in the case of Haaland, his team reached out to Supercell, and then the discussions around, this could be cool, we've never had someone external in the game before, should we do it? Yes, no. These discussions take quite a long time where you don't necessarily get too much work done until you then pull the trigger and say, actually, we're doing this. And then you start working on what should we be doing creatively, producing all of that, which then, let's say, that would take 6 months, but the total process can take a lot longer. It's the same with the WWE. The idea of working with the WWE actually came much before. We've been aware as an organization that people in the WWE were really into Clash for a long time. So it's always just there as, that would be a cool thing to do, should we do it? And then it was actually during a summer break in the previous year where we had some free time. A few of us were still working as most of Finland's on vacation. And so we started to actually make some phone calls and start talking to people and exploring it. And then of course the campaign went live in April. So if you look at it from when it was first mentioned, it was more time, but let's say about a year is a reasonable time frame.
I imagined it took a good length of time, but I think that's cool for people to see the amount of work that does go into the background. It sounds very much like you look for those more naturally, like organic campaigns, things that already have links to Clash of Clans. Is that mainly what you're after when it comes to marketing campaigns?
Yes, it's a very big bonus, and it's been so important to us that that's all we've done in terms of partnerships. We did 2 that are very authentic, and then we worked with chess.com a bit earlier, where there is also some crossover. We think it's good for 2 reasons. Firstly, the authenticity I think shows through. So I think people like it. I think our players appreciate it when they see these big stars who legitimately love the game that they love, and then that translates through to like media and PR pickup as well, because it's authentic. People want to talk about it, which then means it has more of an actual impact on the marketing side. And then conversely, if we did something with no authenticity, I think it might feel overly commercial, and that's not really what we're about. So it's not impossible that we would do something if it's interesting enough with someone who's not familiar to the game. We want to bring new people to the game all the time. Not everyone has to be a mega fan, but it's certainly our preference. And that has actually, it just so happens that that's been where we've activated really big, yeah.
Yeah, because I think there is certain dream partnerships you see within the community. So naturally some of those, if they make a lot of sense for the game, might not cross over as authentically as what you said. But I think it is also good because, like you were saying in terms of media, we certainly seen when it came to the latest one with WWE, Cody Rhodes was able to talk about actual experiences with him, John Cena, and their time playing Clash of Clans. You even had that 10-year-old video of a bunch of the wrestlers playing the game. So it really did shine through how authentic it was, which, like you said, I think it's really important to the player base that it does feel genuine and not forced as well. So when it comes to those campaigns, how do you measure if a campaign is successful or not?
Yeah. So we look at hard metrics that we can measure, and then we look at like some softer things that we think are indicators. So if we start kind of at the very top, you'd look at revenue. And then you can break this down by intent to spend and the quantity of players. And we as a marketing function, we're looking a lot more at the player side, like trying to either keep people in the game or drive users to the game. So we can look at what we call inflows, so the number of people who came to the game for the first time or otherwise have played in the past that came back. And then we also look at retention, just how engaged are the people who are already in the game. These are almost outcome metrics that we look at to judge success. And then there is some breakdown of what is the kind of player, where are they from? We look at some of these things, and of course we target it a bit more campaign to campaign. This is like outcome metrics that we measure, but then there is other things, a lot like on the brand side, brand awareness, brand consideration, spontaneous awareness. These are all metrics we look at to try to proxy for relevance. Like, we want our game to be relevant. We have a huge player base where our aim is that if we ask anyone in the world to think of a game, they think of Clash of Clans. So that's that we would then proxy into spontaneous awareness or unaided awareness, you could say, and that's another metric. And then we look at to take it even more like softer. We'll look at things like the community sentiment, how much people are enjoying it, the ability of a campaign to drive user-generated content, because that's of course ultimately the most important input metric, is are people actually talking about the game. And I imagine when you were going over some of the answers there, it seemed like some of them can become quite hard to measure. Is that basically when you were talking about elements getting softer, they're things that become harder to measure? Obviously, once you get to community sentiment, that becomes a lot more like qualitative measurements, but it felt like there was a bit of middle ground there, which is really difficult to get actual numbers for. Is it more a general feeling you're going for, or like how are you looking at those? I think there's some that are harder to measure, like community sentiment, as you say. We've had some funny instances because there's tools that you can use to measure this, but the tools are not necessarily sophisticated. They don't necessarily understand sarcasm, for example. So this can lead to like false positives and so on. These things are trickier to measure, and you have to like the community managers and different people in the team will make a judgment. And then there's other things that are very easy to measure but not necessarily easy to attribute. So I give an example with WWE. We had, of course, Clash Anytime right before. So we had really positive results, but it becomes a lot more complicated to say like why, because it was, I believe Clash Anytime was really functioning about 3 days before the WWE campaign. And of course you have a seasonality even through the week, weekends and weekdays. So we can't really use those 3 days as a like control. So all we can look at is what actually happened and not necessarily attribute. So it's easy to measure, hard to truly understand.
Hard to specifically give an answer as to this happened because of this, so to speak. That makes sense. One thing that you did say that was interesting to me is you mentioned intent to spend. Can you dig into that a little bit deeper? Is that more like players enjoying the game, that leaning into retention and therefore they might spend in the future? Or like what exactly did you mean by that, and how do you look to measure that? We
have survey data that will look at things like intent to play and intent to spend, because if we look at like a marketing funnel, you can say, are you aware of Clash of Clans, yes or no? If yes, Like, do you like it? Would you play Clash of Clans? And then, are you going to? And so we have this funnel of how we would essentially evaluate potential users or people. And then an additional layer to that can be intent to spend.
Okay.
The reason I mention it as a metric here is because ultimately how much any given user will spend and then how many players there are total is revenue. And
Yes.
we as a marketing team are not chasing revenue. Like it's an important metric for the business, but we see it as something that allows us to grow the game.
Yeah.
If we make more money, we can invest more in developing the game, invest more in marketing the game, and therefore we can build something greater. But we still, for that reason, we do still have to look at it, and we know that our marketing will have an impact on that.
Yeah, like you said, there's even in your answer, I know I picked up on that specifically, but you gave a lot of things that you look at. That's just one of the metrics you're aiming for, and it's like anything. Like your campaigns are going to cost money, so therefore you need to make a certain amount of money back to make that useful. And obviously, you did say specifically with the WWE campaign, it was hard to attribute some of those metrics. That was actually going to be my next question. How did the Haaland and the WWE campaigns measure up to your expectations?
So we were pleasantly, I don't want to say surprised, but we were happy with the results in both cases. We wouldn't have done the two campaigns if we didn't think they were going to be a success. But it's always a bet. Like they could have gone poorly, and I would say in both cases they didn't. In the case with the Haaland campaign, we're quite aware that football, while being the biggest sport in the world, is not necessarily very US-centric, whereas our largest market is the US. So we anticipated results would be disproportionate into other regions that like football better, and that was the case. So that met, let's say, basically met our expectations in that regard. And then WWE was kind of the inverse. It's disproportionately popular in English-speaking countries, including the US, and we saw more PR, more people coming to the game, more engagement in those countries. One thing that we didn't know for sure, but we were very happy with in both cases, especially in the WWE case, is where we introduced these new gameplay elements along with a theme. We don't know for sure if maybe people don't like WWE, and is this going to negatively affect their experience? And it seems that if the gameplay execution was good, like the temp troops were fun to play with, the mechanism with the army camps was cool and innovative, and people liked it even if they didn't like WWE.
Yeah.
And that was one we didn't necessarily have an expectation on, but that was quite good. So yeah, they each drove engagement and users in the countries where people like the thing more, which is more or less what we expected to happen.
Yeah, I'd imagine so. And I'll put a little asterisk when you said football for any US viewers. That you're talking about soccer. They're like, football, we know football in America. Like American football is obviously very, very popular. But yes, when you talk about those campaigns, and I agree, I think it's very important to make sure that you don't alienate the current audience that are playing the game and maybe they don't know about this campaign. It can't feel like it's a different game for them. Is there anything that maybe it's with those campaigns or other campaigns altogether that is maybe too big or has been difficult to pull off? Would you have liked to have pushed things even further?
Yeah, too big to pull off. I think we can always make things happen, but there's been where we've had to control ourselves a little bit with costs. Like we might have certain ideas that we could do. We think it could be really nice, but we'd stop running up costs. Or the other one is we've had some very, very big ideas, but we've just had the idea too late. Whereas like, we don't have time to execute this, and I wish we could. Yeah, there's some stuff that we're thinking about that we've purposely delayed because maybe they require dev work, and there's been like a reprioritization to certain things. We, of course, always want to make the game better. And sometimes doing, for example, if we think about collaborations, doing a really big collaboration could entail quite a lot of dev work that would then take away from something more core to the game. So we prioritize what's core to the game, but there's then these really big ideas that we still have that we would like to execute on. And then same thing with cost, where it's like, we wait for the moment where we can justify doing certain things and make like a really, really big splash.
Yeah, where my mind was going with that when you first mentioned it is holding some campaigns until you have some data from the campaigns you've run already, and then you can see what is successful and is not successful. But I never even thought about from a dev perspective, which again is really important to make sure they're not just working on campaigns. They need to be improving the game for the players as it is. When you talked about you missed the opportunity for one of them, is that more just like relevance, that there was a trend that went and gone sort of thing? Or like what did you mean by that?
Yes, or I think it's normally a factor of timeline, where we've built all these plans to do something, and then something happens that you can play off. We, of course, were working with WWE, as I said before, for more than a year, and WWE don't necessarily share exactly what's happening in the show because they can't, and that's totally reasonable. Had we have known in advance that John Cena was going to turn heel on Cody Rhodes, we might have changed creatively some of what we did.
Okay, that makes sense.
And then we couldn't because of the timeline. And I think what we had was still really cool and actually still worked quite well with what was happening in WWE. But that's an example where we could have done something, but it was late. And then there's one more. This is not something we missed out on because it's too big, but I'm just thinking now down the line of chance. If I take you back to the Haaland campaign, we had payback time. So Haaland's village was in the game. You could raid his village. And we did some very nice advertisements where he would play against a given team and score. And then we would take local media in that area and effectively trigger the fans of that team to want to come to Clash to raid Haaland's village. We had billboard space in Madrid, and it was Champions League, I forget if it was quarters or semis, but it was Man City versus Real Madrid. And Man City lost the game, unfortunately. Had they have won, we could have had a very nice big billboard of Erling Haaland in Madrid the next day.
Yeah.
And so that's
that would have triggered them
like
a little bit more to
dealing,
get them to get on the game and beat him.
Yeah. So this is like, we're not missing that opportunity. It's too big. It's more just with some of these things, especially dealing with sports that you can't control.
Yeah. No, that makes sense.
It would have been so nice.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Like, I guess you got to plan for those, for those opportunities to arise. But we obviously talked a bit about the campaigns there. You mentioned, some big projects, and we've also seen the announcement of a Netflix show for Clash of Clans. Are you able to share information about that?
Yeah, I can share a little bit. So firstly, it's of course something we're like incredibly excited about as it relates to our mission of having games that people play and are remembered forever. We think having Clash in different media spaces is a really big part of that. The show is being developed by Netflix, as you say, development now. The executive producer is the same who was a writer on Futurama, Arrested Development, and some other like really big shows. So that's really exciting as well. For me personally, as a huge Futurama fan, I think that's very nice. We of course have that. Then it's the connection to Clasharama, which is, I think, nice for everyone who's been a fan of Clash for a long time. So we have really, really high expectations for what the show will be, and our team is really close in actually developing it.
Yeah.
What I'll share that maybe hasn't been discussed too much is just a little bit on the visual. Why does it look how it looks? In the teaser, we can see the Barbarian in his silhouette. So why does this one look different to Barbarian in the game? It's so the character can be more expressive. So our current Barbarian and much of our art style, we think, doesn't necessarily translate super well to a full-blown TV show because you can't show as much range of emotion. That's why we've adapted the look, but it's still the same characters, maybe with a small twist.
Interesting. I mean, I certainly look forward to it, and I think it's really interesting that you are trying to move into different areas so that people that really do enjoy the game can enjoy that in different aspects as well. And I guess that goes back to what you were saying of revenue being one of the things you look at, because it then does open up opportunities for you to produce shows like this and almost give back to the community so that they can enjoy it. We've seen the Books of Clash. Anyone that's interested in comics, obviously they've seen that. You mentioned Clasharama. There's also the Epic Raid board game that's in development. So we've seen you tapping into those different mediums. One question that I did get asked since I opened up questions for my community for these different episodes, but I was asked about merchandise. And this is something I often see in my comments as well. Like if I'm wearing a t-shirt, like how can I get that t-shirt or the statues you have in the background? And Clash of Clans did merchandise in the past, but there's nothing really at the moment that is concrete.
Yep.
Are you able to share anything on merchandise? Can we expect that to come back in the future, or what?
Yeah.
What's happening with merchandise?
So there's no current plan for us to produce merchandise ourselves, whether it's to sell or give away. I mean, sometimes at events there'll be some merch that we give away, but it's not like a big part of the business. That said, we recently worked with Charles Jeffrey, who has Charles Jeffrey Loverboy, a big designer who has a range based on Clash, which is really cool, of course, on the more premium side. And then there are some things that are in the pipeline leaning more casual, and I think maybe to an even broader audience that we can't necessarily mention yet because we're still having discussions, but I think it would be cool, and I think people would really like it.
So it sounds like merchandise would be more partner-based, which is what we've seen from Brawl Stars a lot. They've partnered with different toy companies, and I believe we actually even seen that for Clash coming up with U2s.
Yeah.
They have the little figures and the dragon plush, so maybe expecting more partnerships, but not merchandise specific from Supercell?
Yeah, precisely, because we would love, like, I think we would all love for our characters and our brand to be more in the world, especially for the players who really like it.
Yeah.
But it's not something that we're experts on. Like, we make video games, and we of course have merch internally and so on, but there's many businesses and companies a lot better at doing this, and so we can rather work with them on licensing. I'll share just on our approach. We don't see this as a revenue driver as much as we see it as a tool for exposure and a tool to give something that makes players happy.
Yeah.
We're not thinking we're going to partner with so-and-so brand and sell a licensed Clash product because it's going to make tons of money. Like, it's really more about having something cool that exists that people can interact with.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, because I've never really done merchandise myself. However, for my 1 million sub special, I decided to do like a limited merchandise range, and that was not to make money. In fact, I lost money on like I produced some cool little trailers for it and stuff, but it was simply to just give back to my community that wanted that stuff. So it's interesting to hear you say that from like a much larger scale in that of Clash, you know. But I think it is cool to just give back to the community sometimes in there, that if they want those sort of items, and help deepen connections. Moving back to the campaigns though, because that's the biggest impact that people see in the game itself. What are some of the considerations for campaigns when, you touched upon like bringing people back, maybe introducing to the game, but can you talk more specifically on some of the considerations of balancing new players, bringing them in with campaigns, returning players, what's their experience like, and obviously the existing player base as well. So like, how do you try and make a campaign that hits all of those player bases without missing the mark for one of them as well?
Yeah, so if I take an example where we're thinking of something kind of from scratch, because sometimes it could be very opportunistic, we'll have to look at what are we trying to do as a game, like what's our main objective in any given moment in time. Then in Clash, we have the situation where in any given month, the number of players who are in the game and were in the game last month is way bigger than the amount of players that may come in. So the existing players are the center. This is the most important thing always, is that we make something that people who are in the game will like. And then reaching out to new or re-engaged users is kind of a secondary consideration. It's still super important. It might even be the reason why we do something, but the most important total group is the users who are already in the game. As I say, that's the biggest group, and many of them have been in the game for 10 years. So there's a very loyal player base that we have to attend to. So then how do we decide what to do? Going back to what are we trying to achieve? We might still say we have this moment where we really think we can bring people back to the game with this thing, because we know people have been wanting it, and many players have played and lapsed, and if we tell them about this, we think they'll come back to Clash. We'll review things through that lens. We also look at basic targeting of, is this more relevant for a given country? Are we trying to activate in that country or that region more so than another?
Yeah.
And then we also just look at cost benefit of, if we, like, what is the cost of doing this? Not just financial cost, but the time and effort, and what do we think will happen, and then what's the opportunity cost on not doing it and doing something else.
Yeah.
So we look at those things more strategically, and then we try to evaluate creatively what can we actually do. With, if it's a game update, what can we do creatively that can be interesting on this, or if it's a partnership, the same, like, do we have an angle that we can work with? So for example, in the case with Haaland and WWE, because we had that authenticity there, we felt very good about all the, like, say, the more business metrics, but then we think creatively we can really activate this because these people know the game and they'll connect to it. So these are the factors that we'll look at. That's
super interesting. I'm glad I asked, because I know we briefly touched on that before, but I think it was really good to hear from a community perspective that the active player base is the biggest consideration. Yeah, yes, you might do something to try and pull in new and, like, activate the returning players, but the current player base is always at the forefront. I think that's really important to understand, and whenever these decisions are made and there are new things in the game, it's obviously, you know, trying to benefit them as well as the primary thing. And one thing you did touch upon is, like, demographics of the audience, how you're trying to maybe lean into certain demographics with certain campaigns. Are you able to share much about the demographics of the game, or?
Sure. Yeah. So there's, of course, some of this information is, like, somewhat public.
Yeah.
But I can share high levels. So we can see that the average age, for example, of someone playing is typically like a young adult. Where there's a difference is the age at which people enter the game tends to be a bit younger. And of course, many people stay for so long that they might have entered the game at age 19, but then the average actual player age is, say, 23. Then, if we look at people who are spending in the game, average skews a little bit older. And then if we keep on that metric, it tends to follow, like, purchasing power by country. So a little bit as you'd expect. So someone in a country with high purchasing power is more likely to spend than one in a lower country. We're very, very diverse nationally, internationally. So because Clash is such a big game, we tend to just simply have more users in countries with higher populations, specifically populations that are on the internet and playing mobile games.
Yeah.
So that means countries like the USA, India, Brazil, Malaysia, Indonesia, Philippines, like any country that has a lot of people, Germany, UK, Turkey. Lots of people means we have probably lots of players there. We skew a little bit towards like Western Europe and North America, but it's like we're super broad in that regard. Really quite diverse especially as far as generally mobile games go. We have a really broad player base, which I think is partially a consequence of the game being so big for so long. You know, we have more than 2 billion lifetime downloads, so some duplication in there, but it means that an awful lot of people have played or are playing, and so it's a big mix.
Yeah, and I find it interesting that you might even find that you were talking about, like, when people download and first enter the game, you might find that maybe even that gets younger as people start having kids, and then their kids start getting involved with the game that they've played for years. Like, that'll that'll naturally happen in my instance as well. Like, when my kids are at an age of playing games, they'll probably give Clash a go, you know? So I think that might be an interesting metric to see.
We're in that, we think about it, because we're in that point now where, like, when Clash really first took off was 2014, there is people who were in university at that time who now have kids old enough that they start exploring with games. So there's very much that. It's an interesting angle.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I even see it in my comments section, you know, like people, I started watching you when I was in primary school, and now I've graduated, you know, I'm in college or like whatever. It's interesting to see the growth of the game and the players within the game as well, how people do stick around with it for a long term. And I think, like you said, that's a metric of its success. When you're talking about the diverse and, like, globalness of the game. I think it helps that you do try and make it accessible to, we just had
Yep.
Polish added to the game in terms of language. I think that's important. You've also been expanding into like global pricing to make the game accessible across different regions. So I think that's important. Is that something you're able to speak into a little bit actually, or is that not really your...
think it's not strictly my area, but I think a lot about like regions and where we should be targeting. One thing we have that's quite nice with Clash is the game is not that taxing on devices. So that's something you see quite noticeably. With games that require more processing power, you can see them disproportionately go to, again, higher purchasing power markets because people have the newest phone. So that actually means that we maybe take more of our share, especially if we compare to a game like, say, Brawl Stars, which is a bit more processing power intensive. We're more accessible in Southeast Asia, India. And that means that those countries have more Clash fans. And then, as you mentioned, with the pricing, that's something that there's a lot of reasons why it's not been fully implemented. But I can say as a marketing team, we really want this to work because we want the game to be more accessible in these countries. And then we want people to be able to have like a real good experience in the game because it is so much more accessible than many mobile games. And I think that's then reflected in our like relative market share in certain countries. So India is a good example. We're relatively very strong in India. And I think we can be even stronger once we've adjusted our pricing to make more sense for them to be more attractive for people there. And then the other thing, this might get a little bit technical, but is like payment processes, like payment providers. There is many countries that don't have the same infrastructure that you might have in the US. So it makes actually paying for things harder. There is work on like the business development side there that will then actually make the game, I think, even more accessible for many countries.
Yeah, that's amazing. I know they added UPI to the Supercell store as well recently. So I think that and global pricing, like you're saying, is just really good to make it more accessible for different players and like make it so they can enjoy the game more if they are able to actually spend the money in order to enhance their gameplay. So I think that's just a really great thing, and I would just encourage you to obviously continue with that. In terms of marketing itself then, moving back to what you're involved in, I just have a couple of more questions, but it feels like from a player perspective anyway, the marketing has developed and shifted quite a lot in the last couple of years. Are you able to talk about how much the marketing, like what you've aimed for, what kind of things you've been doing has shifted?
I can give like a brief history, maybe. Let's say in the earlier days of Clash, I think we put a lot of emphasis on really high quality animations, which were really cool, really brand building. And then as Clash started to mature as a game, there was this switch at some point where we started producing less of these because really nice animations can be quite expensive. And you have that point where everything is so great, but you don't know what drives what. And so logically, people start thinking, what if we don't do that or we take that away? And so we started producing less of the animations and started then a little bit later doing more performance marketing. So like the adverts that you see if you're on YouTube before a video or you go to the App Store and you see it there. Like we started doing more of this, which is more measurable, but less brand building. This is also extremely common within mobile games, but Supercell's in quite a unique place where we actually did a lot of brand building. Taking that forwards, we've started to lean a little bit more on things like partnerships with Haaland and WWE, then with the Netflix show, and as you say, different merch things to expand a little bit. And I think where we want to go is getting back into building more of the like content and lore of Clash, and that's like where we are kind of now and going into the future as well.
Interesting. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. We've definitely seen that development, and it'll be interesting to see where it goes in the future as well. One aspect of that, which I know you alluded to earlier, is working with creators. Obviously, Supercell has the creator program now. From a marketing perspective, how do you value the work with creators, not just from YouTube, but from people producing websites for the game to Discord bots? How do you value the work that they do and the role of the creator program as a whole?
Yeah, so I'll start by saying from Supercell wide, the creator program is, I think, something that people are incredibly proud of because it's the best in the industry and it's like groundbreaking for what it is. I'll try to focus on marketing, but it's hard not to divert a little bit because I know that yourself and many other creators have so much input on actual game development as well and relaying this feedback of what people want on the marketing side. So about 2/3 of people come to our game through word of mouth. And that includes seeing people like you, other creators. So it's extremely important as let's say, marketing tool of actually to have people here.
Yeah.
And that's not to mention even just like the feedback relationship of like being able to soundboard, like, do we think people will like this or not? So being able to drive this word of mouth, this user-generated content, it's the most authentic kind of marketing, and therefore it's the most effective way of bringing the game to people.
Yeah, that's awesome. And yeah, I mean, even as a little example, my little boy watches, I'll try and get him to watch Clash of Clans content, but like, no, he loves watching Minecraft, right, on YouTube. He doesn't even know that it's a game.
Yeah.
It is a prime example of where content can actually be the entry factor for people as well.
Yeah.
So that's great to hear that, you know, so much of the work that creators, not just on YouTube, but elsewhere, what they do is helpful in the game's success, and that you value that as well.
I would say even, to take it away from YouTube for a second, even, I don't know if people would know how much we as a team pay attention to certain content. For example, I really like everything that Clash Ninja does. And seeing like these
shout out to
breakdowns.
Clash Ninja. He actually had a couple of the questions for this interview. So there you go.
I saw today in our own internal discussion board, we had one of the game developers say, I used this tool to evaluate my base progress, and they shared it in, and we're all fans of the game. And we engage with that, and I think it's quite inspiring. And I wish we go to a place, and I think we will eventually, where we have more in the game that can allow creators to be creative with what they do. So there's games, Minecraft, as you say, GTA 5, Roblox. These games are almost, well, Roblox literally is a platform, but the others are almost like a platform content creation. I very much like the idea of Clash going in that direction, where we can be even more, and we give more tools for people to express themselves and to create content. Yeah. Obviously, a lot of what you do about the current game, but then maybe even people being able to create something that's totally new with the game. I think that's really cool.
Yeah, I mean, I've had this conversation with people on Reddit, and like gave this answer before as well, that it's so great to see the amount of creators covering different aspects of the game. To, you know, people play the game in different ways. That's one of the things I think is fantastic about Clash, is it opens up opportunities for people to play the game how they like. And it's the same with content. Like, people like watching creators that cover this type of content, or maybe they cover esports or the competitive scene, or more casual, just fun content. Like, there's different creators for different aspects of the game. So that'd be awesome to see Clash go a little bit more in that direction as well. But my final question was just if there was anything that I hadn't asked you that you wanted to share with the community.
It's maybe the one I will share that I have to hold myself back from saying is, we as a Clash team, we pay attention to social media, we read comments, we see stuff. I, as a fan of the game, always would like to know that someone's actually seeing it, and even if someone who works in the game can't go to Reddit and reply and say, this is me, I work on the game, I see this, we see a lot. Feedback is listened to, and we're paying attention. Yeah.
Well, that's great to hear. David, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it.
Cheers.
There's 60+ people on the Clash of Clans team. I'm just the one dumb enough to get in front of a camera.
What are you doing in the game to try and help players see success and help them to learn the game?
Building an army from scratch is kind of a nightmare. We need Home Village to be perfect. Is this a game about building lots of different villages? Like, what is this game about? Lost a lot of good men in Town Hall 11.
Clash is about progression, and temporary content is not satisfying.
Oh, when's the next season gonna start? I'm so sick of Hook Tower already, right? Some people just hate it.
Oh my gosh, I think it's the best one. I think it's interesting you mentioned the Eagle Artillery. Maybe we see it come back in a seasonal defense.
Let's talk updates. Fairy's got a pistol just off camera.
Can we expect any updates to build a base?
No, quit asking.
Seth said we're getting heroes when they're upgrading.
The profile needs an overhaul. we are talking a lot about smaller cosmetics, emotes, spray paints, builder skins. I'll give you a little behind the scenes here.